So yesterday we talked about strategy stock and how it had been going down a lot alongside Bitcoin. BMNR, Bitmine Immersion Technologies, the Tom Lee cryptocurrency treasury stock, has also been suffering, perhaps even more so. At least yesterday was a significantly red day compared to MicroStrategy, which actually went up, had a little bounce as we sort of predicted yesterday. So let's do a bit of analysis on Bitmine, see what's going on with the stock and whether or not it's a good opportunity right now to buy, or perhaps we should wait for better entries. We love to draw parallel channels on this channel, and that's what we're going to be doing here. There is a very clear parallel channel that this stock has been trading in recently, and it's just here. This is how I would draw it. You see price has been in this sort of range recently, and we can expect to at some point be getting down to the lower level of the channel again, and then presumably get back up. Perhaps even once we reach the top of the channel once again, we will be able to break higher and break out of it, as has happened in the past. This is not the most, the strongest parallel channel, because you have been able to get out above it previously, but it should be good for a bounce, and that's certainly where I'm targeting a longer term buy. You may be able to get a shorter term bounce at this level here, a sort of double bottom in the same way that you may have had on MicroStrategy, but I wouldn't be looking at this as a long term, buyable opportunity or anything that's necessarily going to result in a new high for Bitmine or anything like that. I think we need to first revisit the lower level of this channel. So in terms of short term, this can be okay for a bounce, perhaps back up to maybe even $30. I don't know if it'll go that high. Hard to say, probably not. Depends, of course, on the movements and fluctuations of Bitcoin and Ethereum. I think it's perhaps more likely that we come down, but recovery bounce after you drop substantially is, of course, always possible. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I'm looking at a further 16-17% drop, perhaps a little bit more from these levels down to $20 or so on Bitmine. I think that will be a good opportunity to buy, and it's a place I would personally consider entering around $20. Of course, the upside target on the parallel at this point is around $38, but I do foresee in the future at some point breaking back out of this parallel channel, and even if it's just a lower high on this kind of a trend line, you can imagine we would at some point get back up there to maybe $40, $50, $47, $50, something like this, $45 maybe even, maybe a bit lower, $40 depending on at what point you're breaking out of this and coming to meet this trend line. Perhaps you can go beyond that, depends how bullish you are on Ethereum and Bitmine, of course. I'd be concerned about this trend line in the future. It's probably going to be resistance at some point. So those are the price targets. If we just compare quickly to Ethereum, so we can see how that, where that corresponds on the Ethereum chart. So of course we've got the first potential double bottom that we're putting in here. Not a guarantee by any means, and I wouldn't necessarily be thrilled to trade this myself, but it's possible. If you're optimistic, you can reverse here, and we could be going back and potentially, I saw on Bitcoin even, there could be a sort of head and shoulders type situation playing out. That's something to keep in mind. If the price were to come back to sort of $108,000, you'd be looking at a head and shoulders pattern to maybe take crypto a bit lower. But regardless, Ethereum might be putting in a bottom here, a short-term bottom, but I'm much more looking at the $2,150 thereabouts kind of level. This level here, you've got a lot of previous support. Price is often wicked down and then been bought back up at this level. So I would be looking at 2,150, and you can see in terms of the move here, that would be 18% down. So I think it's not improbable that you could get that move down at some point. Might not be immediately. In the short term, of course, we may come back up for a bit and even put in a pretty good move, potentially, not impossible, but at some point I expect us to visit this level here, 2,150, and that would correspond to, on the Bitmine chart, that would correspond to probably the lower part of the parallel channel. So I'd be looking at that as a really good point to get a bounce. Whether or not that is the long-term bottom for the stock, hard to say. I think if we see Bitcoin going all the way down to sort of 60,000 and even below, then you could see lower prices on Ethereum. And in fact, the target I have on Ethereum is this trend line here, which I think should be quite strong if you get there. But it's significantly lower. You're looking at more like perhaps 1,600 on ETH, maybe higher, 1,700, something like this, but a pretty substantial move down from here, further 40% potential, probably not as much as that, maybe 35%, something like this. So that's where I'd be looking at long term now. What does that mean for Bitmine? Well, hard to say. It could mean that you're just going to get a bounce from the bottom of the channel and you're going to end up coming up a bit higher, maybe even to the top, and then head back even lower. And perhaps that could signal, you're coming down here to $18 or so. I don't know, maybe even lower. If we're saying that that could happen a bit further out, perhaps it happens, towards the end of the year, let's say. Yeah, perhaps you're going down, roughly 40% or so, similar to Ethereum, down to $15, $14, something like this in the long term. So that's my outlook at the moment. It's something along these lines. I don't know if we're going to go up here, maybe not, but I think at some point we're going to make it down here. We're going to get a bounce, a pretty sizable bounce, but then perhaps we're going to even roll over and go a bit further down, and then this will probably be the point from which you launch back into a good, healthy bull market for the stock. If you're bullish on the stock, then that would be the outlook, I think. Of course, no guarantees, and we can only attempt to predict the future. We cannot know anything for certain here, but yeah, these would be my price targets for BMNR, Bitmine, and Ethereum. I hope that's helpful for you planning where to enter or even exit a prospective position. But thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe for daily charts, of course, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.